Do I dare state whose life matters? That's coming up on our next episode of Coffee Break. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Coffee Break with me, where I talk about the things that I like to talk about, maybe even some things I really don't like to talk about, but things that have to be addressed over, you guessed it, a cup of coffee. Um, well, let's just get right into it. It's not going to be a lighthearted one, hopefully edifying, hopefully encouraging. But the way the current culture is responding to messages like I'm going to say, I don't know if it's going to be super well received. But here we go. I want to talk about Black Lives Matter. Specifically, the organization, not the statement itself. Maybe a little bit on the statement itself, but let's um, let's provide a little background of why I'm doing this specific video. Um, you go back to Trayvon Martin, and that is kind of the moment that everything got real energized for this movement. And then you had the issues over in Ferguson, which kind of birthed the Black Lives Matter movement, and it became this organization. And the organization has been around since then and has been very active and gets a lot of support and donors, and it's a thriving nonprofit business, um, or a thriving nonprofit, I should say. It's a thriving nonprofit, and it's ran by feminists. It's definitely ran by feminists, and I'm talking about your modern, real left wing feminists. I'm not talking about people who think women should have rights. Of course, women should have rights. We're talking the actual, real feminist movement that tends to be real anti-men, and so that's who runs the BLM organization. And you had the George Floyd incident. I have talked about it already once, and said what I had to say. Now, I am seeing a lot of people who, his history gets dug up, and a lot of people go, well, he wasn't a very good guy. Regardless of his past, he did not do a crime that is punishable by death. Let's just be honest about this. If there was a crime involved, it was not a crime that deserves death, and so we should not disregard his death, or any person's death for that matter, if it's an unjust death and they died for something that wasn't worthy of that. So, I mean, that's just the general point, is that we have a legal system, we have a justice system, and that's supposed to serve justice. And if somebody's crime uh, doesn't deserve a death penalty and they die because of the crime, then an injustice has been done. And so that's just objectively looking at it. And so you have the George Floyd thing taking place. This man was killed by a police officer while in handcuffs. The police officer kneeled on his neck. You all know the story. I don't need to inform you all of the story. And so we've seen riots take place, protests take place, looting take place. Not all of them connected to each other, maybe some of it, but not all of it. So the protesters are not necessarily looting. The looters are not necessarily protesting. It doesn't mean they're connected, but it is taking place. And so we see that happening, and it's depressing. It's sad. It's sad to see what the sinfulness of man will do, and then it's sad to see people supporting it, the sinful behavior, because an injustice was done. And so what's happening is we are causing more injustice for the sake of injustice. Makes no sense, but it's happening. Now, again, not everybody's doing that. There are people who are legitimately protesting within the confines of the law and within the confines of their rights, and we should support that. If somebody's protesting within the confines of the law and within the confines of their rights, then hey, more power to you. But that's not the only thing we are seeing, and so we don't want to blend these different things together. Or we don't want to mix these different things together. There are protesters who are legitimately protesting, but also though there are those who are just interested in looting and that alone. And it's not for justice. It's not to be heard. It's for free stuff. Excuse me. And so that is something that has to be taken in consideration. And and so we started seeing the Black Lives Matter kind of recirculate back into the conversation, and a lot of people were joining it and saying Black lives do matter, and you've seen some people respond, well, all lives matter, and people are getting upset about that. They're getting upset about other people responding, all lives matter. From their point of view, from the BLM point of view, and people who support BLM, they're saying you're kind of undermining what we're trying to do and what we're saying. You're not being very supportive by undercutting us by saying all lives matter. And they give this analogy where everybody's out to eat, everybody orders food, and poor Bob at the end of the table didn't get his food, but everyone else did. And somebody says, excuse me, Bob didn't get his food. And then somebody comes in and goes, well, everybody deserves food. It's a made up scenario. It's a made up narrative to kind of an analogy. It's an analogy to get people to see what's going on, but it's nonetheless it's a specific analogy, and it's saying isn't that's what essentially people are doing when they say all lives matter. And to be honest, I'm seeing a lot of Christians who are upset over things that I don't know if they've thought through completely. Uh, the Christians, us Christians, we should be having a biblical response and a biblical response only. Of course, every Christian thinks they are having that biblical response, but we're being told what we're allowed to say and not say instead of giving a biblical teaching on why we say what we say or why we say what we shouldn't say. That kind of thing is not happening. What's happening is saying you guys cannot say this and don't question it. And it's not right. It's not right for ministers of the gospel not to teach people the biblical model of how we should approach this, the biblical teaching of how we should approach this, and just say, you know what, we shouldn't be doing this because people's feelings are getting hurt. We're Christians. We're gonna hurt feelings, okay? The scriptures tells us that the gospel is foolishness to those who are perishing, and so we are the ones that can't be overly concerned about people's feelings with our words if we're telling the truth. Now we need to do this carefully, and I need to approach this carefully as well. I need to approach this carefully as well, because my intention is not to offend anybody, though I know I'm going to offend somebody. But it's not my intention. My intention is to really get the biblical understanding of what our response should be and get us back in the proper worldview. And I don't think a lot of ministers are leading in giving a proper worldview. What they are doing is saying, you need to be supporting this because this is how somebody feels, and don't question otherwise. And I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with the people of God being told that they can't question. They need a biblical response and a biblical answer, and they're not getting the full of it. What they're getting is they're taking the narrative of the parable that Jesus gave of the 99 sheep, the 100 sheep, the 99 were there and one went astray, and the good shepherd went after the one that strayed. And they're using that narrative and they're saying, did the 99 sheep say, we all matter too? Why are you going after that one? That text has nothing to do with the racial issues that we are seeing in our culture. That has to do with salvation. That has to do with God seeking after the lost, seeking after his sheep who are lost. And it's all salvation based and how God is the one that seeks and draws us back. And they're taking that and they're using it for a racial narrative. And it's not okay. It's not okay to abuse God's word to fit our specific cultural, whatever you want to call it, situation, um, just because we're trying to get a point across biblically. There is a biblical approach we can take, and unfortunately, a lot of people are not satisfied with that. So, what is the biblical approach? Well, we need to look at biblical anthropology. We need to look at who man is in the scriptures and treat it with that way. And so, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. What we have in that statement is mankind is created, and mankind is created in the image of God. We are image bearers. And so automatically, as believers of God and his creation, we have to believe in the Genesis account of his creation, and we affirm that yes, man is made in the image of God. We are image bearers, and that automatically means that I have to show every single living person dignity and respect according to the biblical standards. Now, I have to say according to the biblical standards because automatically someone will come in and say, you won't affirm homosexuals being married, therefore you are not showing dignity or respect. Yes, I am, because the scriptures teach us what homosexuality is, how it's offensive to God, and we are giving them that warning that this is not okay. You are going against the image of God by going against creation, the natural function of the man and the woman, and so you are in violation of nature. You're in violation of creation. And you're causing harm to yourself. You're not doing something good. We care enough to say these things. But, of course, they don't see it that way. Um, and that is because ultimately, folks, we have two different worldviews. We have two different worldviews taking place. And so the worldview I'm discussing right now is the biblical worldview. And the biblical worldview states that all mankind was created in the image of God. We are all image bearers. And so as believers, we are to grant every living person dignity and respect according to the biblical model, according to the biblical standards. Okay? Therefore, the scriptures do not grant me the freedom to say whose lives matter and whose lives don't matter. The scriptures do not allow me the freedom to restrict it down and not speak up on another. The scriptures do not allow me to have the freedom to uphold one and ignore another. What it grants me, it gives me the freedom to show dignity and respect to all lives, regardless of skin color. Because if somebody is being truly racist, not necessarily the racism as it's defined today, we're talking two different narratives. I'm a little old school thinking. The racism that I have witnessed and seen was true hate rather than an institutionalized whatever they're calling it. That's a whole nother subject. But the racism that I'm thinking about, that I think a lot of us are familiar with, where it shows true hatred, where somebody is truly having hate in their heart because of that person's skin color. Doesn't matter how good of a person they are, doesn't matter how nice they are, their skin color is the reason why somebody is hating them. That person is not just hating that individual, but they're hating God. And the crime is really against God because He is the creator, and that man or woman is bearing the image of God. And so man's hatred is not just against another person's skin color. Their hatred is against God. They are declaring war on God and His creation. This is true of all sin, just about. This is true of homosexuality. This is true of murder. People murder because they hate God and they're destroying the image of God. People practice homosexuality because they hate God and they want to go against the natural function that God created, and so they're going what is contrary to nature, as Romans 1 reminds us. And so they are haters of God, and ultimately their war is against God, and that is what they're doing with their actions. They are committing acts that are against God first, but the people that they are actively showing this hate to, they just happen to be the casualties of war. And so that is the one who is most offended by these actions is God himself, because he is the creator and we are created in his image, and God said it is good. And so we cannot make distinctions on based on one's skin color on who matters or doesn't matter. And you would think that would go without saying, but apparently it has to be said. And even now, some people might be upset and they're going to say, I don't agree with you. I don't like what you have to say. This is so wrong. And I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm trying to point us to the proper biblical view where we're offering the solution to racism through Jesus Christ. That's the offer we're giving. We want to cure people of their racism by giving them the gospel message, demanding their repentance, and even calling out the racism specifically, and telling them to turn upon the Lord Jesus for salvation. That's what we're doing. We are offering the cure. Nobody else is offering the cure. They're trying to systematize it, and they're trying to politicize it, and they're trying to make a political agenda go into effect through all this. They're using racism to their advantage. And so that would be the biblical worldview, the view that I just gave. And when you hold the biblical worldview, I can rightfully say all lives matter and it not be condescending, but it be something of beauty and something that's good, because it means something. I serve a God who creates and who gives purpose to life and purpose to all of this that we see. Even when we don't understand it, he gives purpose to it all. And so I serve a God of purpose, and I know everything has purpose. And so when I say all lives matter, it truly means something. When I say Black Lives Matter, it truly means something. It's not just some empty statement being made, and it's not some politicized statement being made. It actually means something. Let's contrast that with the atheist view. The atheist worldview means nothing. All of this is one big cosmic accident. It was just, we eventually were a bunch of cells that eventually formed and started to speak of philosophy and morality, and we just kind of, over billions and billions and billions of years, I don't even think they know how many billions of years at this point anymore. I gotta take a drink of coffee, guys. And so it's a big cosmic accident. There is no true morality. Morality is what we make of it. There's nobody higher or lower than each other, because we're all one cosmic accident, and we just happen to be able to moralize things, where these other creatures did not come to that yet. Maybe one day through evolution they will, but as of right now, they can't really distinguish morality like mankind can. And so it means nothing. So if there's an atheist saying, "Hey, all lives matter," then yeah, maybe that is a condescending statement because it's coming from nowhere. It means nothing to that man or that person. It means absolutely nothing because we came from absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing. But on the other side, if you're an atheist saying Black Lives Matter, that means absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing. You're just showing your real racism that you're trying to. I don't want to say necessarily hold one race higher than another, but it means nothing because it comes from nothing. There's no creator in atheism. There's no anything divine within creation or outside of creation that caused it. There's just none of that, and so it means absolutely nothing. So 50 years down the road, what will it mean when evolution's taken place according to them, and we have different people with different sets of morals? Because morality would change in atheism, right? Can't stay the same. If it was the same, what are your standards? What are you basing your morality on? And then they wind up walking into a rabbit hole of they don't know what, because it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. We are just one big accident. And so, yeah, any way you paint it, in an atheistic worldview, saying Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter both mean absolutely nothing. And yeah, you kind of have a right to be offended if uh, if someone's making empty statements like that on both sides of that. And so we have two different worldviews present right now. Now here's the issue. On top of the other issues I just mentioned, the secularist who hold the atheist worldview. By the way, so does everybody who has a false god. They may not be atheists by definition, but they are worshiping something false. And atheists are worshipers too. I don't know who they think they're kidding. They worship themselves above all. That's evident. But anyway, that's a whole nother video. Um, they they assume equality because that's what everybody's crying out. They're crying out for equality. We have to have equality. We have to have all this equality, and so they think we're the same in thought, and we're not. My worldview is very different from the atheist worldview because my worldview comes from the scriptures, and theirs don't. And so I have a foundation I can stand on and say, when I say this, it actually means something. And they don't have that. They don't have that foundation. They don't have that security. It's just their thoughts here and now. Of course, I will then argue that God's law is written on their hearts, and their sense of injustice is because God has written their law on their hearts, but they'll deny that. They suppress the truth of God and their knowledge of God. And so, two different worldviews taking place, and they're under the assumption that we all have the same way of thinking, and we don't. And they want us in line with their thinking. It's a new secular fundamentalism that's taking place out there, and that is what we are witnessing: is a secular fundamentalist movement, and they are demanding that we conform, or get out of the way, or possibly worse. And so we're not on the same page. We're not in the same view. And the Black Lives Matter organization is so antichrist, I can never, ever be associated with such a group. On their website, um, let me. I'm gonna read this from their. This is pretty much what they believe about them in their, and this is on their actual website. We are guided by the fact that all Black Lives Matter, regardless of actual or perceived sexual identity, gender expression, economic status, ability, disability, religious beliefs or disbeliefs, immigration status, or location. And so they say, regardless of religious beliefs. And then they go on to say, we make space for transgender brothers and sisters to participate and lead. And they go on, we are reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift black trans folk, especially black trans women who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. We build a space that affirms black women and is free from sexism, misogyny, and environments in which men are centered. So it's not only is it it's anti-Christian, but it's sexist too, because they're haters of men, and it makes sense because they're feminist. We practice empathy, not getting that. We engage comrades with the intent to learn about and connect with their context. Did you pay attention? We engage comrades. That is a word that was recycled from communism. That's what they call each other, and they're open communist in here. They don't say we are communist, but the language is all there. It's pretty much it's anti-religious in any form, in any way. They're real anti-religious, and then they come in with their political ideology and agenda. This is really not about black lives. It's about a political movement, and it's being funded by politicians and um, political backers, and so that's where they're getting their funds from. They say Black Lives Matter, but I don't think they care about the unborn. I don't think they care about black unborn. Uh, the numbers are not in their favor if they say they do. They're not caring about black on black crime, and that's the unfortunate thing. And it's not being addressed. I think let me change that. It is being addressed. It's not being addressed on a national level. There are plenty of people who are speaking up, but their voices are being muzzled because it doesn't fit the narrative. I'm not the only one who's saying this. There's plenty out there saying this as well. And so I don't think they truly believe in Black Lives Matter, especially with a political party that has historically been associated with always keeping black people down. That's a historical fact. And so when you start getting into the numbers and to the facts of it all, it just doesn't add up with the narrative, which is why they don't want people talking about the facts and the numbers of it all. And so what do? Well, when somebody like me comes along and says something like this, they come in and they try to disregard somebody like me. This man's a racist. He's not, listen to what he's saying. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Folks, my mother is a heroin addict. Not just heroin. She's on just about every drug she can get her hands on, but heroin was her drug of choice. I have watched her come close to overdosing several times. I mean, she's OD'd, but when I say overdose, I'm talking death. Um, she's overdosed and survived, but she's come close to death several times. I have seen her in a very, very miserable state. My dad ran out before I was even born. I did not meet that man until he was an adult, and it was me that had to search down that family. That's what happened. I had to search. I had to hunt down that family as an adult. We were living with my grandparents at the time, back on and off again, between my drug addict mother and her in the prison system. Just all the time. She was always in and out of jail, and because she was always doing crimes. Um, at one point, during a season in my life, she had ripped off so many gangs that there were so many people threatening her, and she would have us kids, we were kids at the time, go outside, and if she heard gunshots, then she knew that there were gang related activity. There was gang related people who were looking for her and were willing to kill her family to get to her. In other words, she was using her children as a bullet shield. That was my childhood. That's what I went through. At one point, one man successfully did break into our house and had a noose, and he stepped towards my mom, and she kept screaming and screaming, and she screamed really loud that he got scared and wound up running off. The man wasn't very smart because he did this in the wintertime, and there was snow on the ground, and they just followed his tracks. And so that did happen, and that was growing up. While we were with my mom at that time, we were very hungry. We did not eat a lot. We were trying to keep silent about it to my grandmother because we knew our mom would go back to jail, which is something we did not want. But hey, that was growing up. That was the kind of life I had with my grandparents. Great people. did the best they could with what they could. They were old and tired. What can I say? Like they never got to enjoy their golden years because of us kids, and they were on Social Security, and it was Social Security meant for them. It wasn't meant for a family of five. It was just it was a small amount of money. So we were very broke growing up. Of course, Grandma and Grandpa made sure that we never went hungry, but and I'm not complaining about how my grandparents raised. I'm very thankful. I'm just saying that my point of all of this is I was the one, by definition, by BLM's definition, and by every left progressive person's definition, I'm the one who was the oppressed. I'm not the oppressor. I'm the one who is oppressed. If we were looking at it on a blank sheet and all the details of my life, they would say, here was a person who was oppressed. And so I don't care to hear people make judgments on me because I love Jesus, because Jesus loves me, because I want to be faithful to God, and because I serve in a Baptist ministry. They would instantly disregard me. They would instantly disregard me based off what I'm saying right now, not knowing how I was raised and grew up. Um, I'm part of that. I'm part of that. I came up in the oppressed life. I was in the poor neighborhoods, and I was also in some nice neighborhoods though too with my grandparents. But hey, that was growing up. So I am the one who was oppressed by their definition. I don't call it that. I don't see it that way. But that's because I know my role in life. I know biblical anthropology. And so I know that I am an image bearer, and I also know that I sin. I have a fallen nature, and I am deserving of God's wrath because I have defied and rebelled against our holy God. And and he is our everlasting holy God, so the punishment is only fair that my punishment be everlasting. But he has shown me grace through his son Jesus Christ, and that's not anything that has anything to do with oppression or me having some type of privilege of any sort, which is what they would accuse me of. Not knowing how I grew up, they would accuse me of privilege. Here's the thing, folks. Oppression does exist, but it's called sin. Sin is oppressing you, and sin is moving this BLM movement, and sin is moving these looters and these people who are committing these wretched acts. Sin is the real oppressor. Sin is what's causing this racial hatred, and there's only real freedom in Jesus. Jesus Christ alone is where we find that freedom. We are the only ones who are offering solutions. There is no such thing as a group reconciliation. It has never happened. It has never happened. Don't believe me? We're still waiting for the Republicans and Democrats to get along, right? There's never been a group reconciliation because a group will never think identically. They never will. You're asking huge bodies of people to think the exact same way, and that won't happen. There will always be somebody go, wait, I'm not on board with that, and you'll never have group reconciliation. What we need is heart-to-heart reconciliation. So me speaking to you on an individual basis, and you speaking to someone else on an individual basis, and having this heart-to-heart reconciliation through the gospel message and with God's grace. And until we get that, we're not fixing anything. Socially, the world, we're not fixing anything. And so biblical Orthodox Christianity is the only movement, it's the only message, it's the only faith that is offering a solution, and they're rejecting it. And I will be called an oppressor possibly for saying something like that, and I will be called whatever I'll be called. I don't care. I don't care what people have to call me. The fact of the matter is we have two separate worldviews, and one of them shows dignity and respect. And when that one worldview, the biblical worldview, says all lives matter, or even just Black Lives Matter, if they not just Black Lives Matter, if they just keep it a statement as Black Lives Matter, it actually means something. Whereas the other worldview, the worldview of the BLM organization itself, it means absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing. I don't. Ours means something. I might have said nothing back there. I don't know. I don't even know what I said. Sorry, guys. I'm going a million miles per second. But anyway, it actually means something when we say it. So I want to end this by saying again, not intending to make anyone mad. That is my last intention, but fully aware that I will make somebody mad. Um, and so, my greatest prayer for this is that it was more of an encouragement and a way of looking at something that we don't have to live in fear. We don't have to be scared or anything like that. And I'm not going to be bullied into submission because a movement and group has been politicized so much. And hey, look, if some of these groups were planes, they would have two left wings. That's how far left they are, and I'm just not on board with it. And it has its roots in communism, and in Marxism they have something called a what do they call it? A oh, what do they call it? A oh, it escapes me right now. I apologize, guys. It's something dummy. A useful dummy or something. Yeah, a useful dummy. That's what they call it. And that's where they will. Somebody's on there helping them push their cause without them knowing it, or maybe they do know it, but they're not with them, and so they're calling them a useful dummy. We're going to use these people or these groups or these situations to advance our causes because they actually have a teaching called for useful dummies. And so, unfortunately, pastors are being used that way, ministries are being used that way, politicians are being used that way, and it's working. I will not be bullied into submission, and I will not be a useful dummy for organizations that are inherently antichrist. And so there's my video for this week. I don't know if I'll keep the comments on in this video. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what traction it gets and how much hate it gets. I imagine it will. And so I might turn the comments off on this one just to spare me the foul language that could come or the threats or whatever may come. So anyway, guys, hey, thanks a bunch for listening. Thanks for you guys who've been watching and tuning in all the time. Thanks a lot. And hope you guys all have just a wonderful, blessed week. God bless. Take care.